Welcome back. Although millions of residents in rural areas still live without basic necessities such as access to clean water and proper sanitation, efforts to uplift these communities continues. The Social Change Assistance Trust, or better known as Scat, celebrated 25 years of social development last week. Now their work focuses mainly on the upliftment of rural communities across the nation. Talk us through their work and their future plans. We're joined by Greg Erasmus, Scat Trustee. Thanks so much, Greg, for your time this morning.
Thank you for having us.
25 years it's been, and this had come out, or the discussions were around with the Norwegians, the Dutch, and South African communities to uplift the poor.
Yeah, one of the issues that we found in 1984 was that there were lots of communities that were facing repression at the time. They needed to organize themselves and they needed resources for that. But part of the problem with communities, especially isolated communities in the rural areas, is that they don't have access to funders. They don't have access to the networks. And what happened was the three founder members of Scat basically got together, set up the trust, and used their influence then to obtain funding from the Norwegian governments, later the Dutch governments and others, and then basically dispense that money to communities that needed it.
Yeah, and your work has been appreciated. You're an award-winning NGO, which is very accountable as well. It's comfort for donors to know that the money donated is being spent effectively.
Yeah, I think that's a big issue with NGOs. Scat has got a very proud record of having 25 years of unqualified audits. Our work is quite complex because we disburse money to 60 rural organizations. They then have to account to us. We have a very sophisticated accounting mechanism, which includes field visits. So it doesn't only mean it's a remote relationship. We actually send people into the communities who then work with those organizations to build up their capacity to manage funding. It's very important as a sustainability strategy for them, because as they become better at that, they attract other funding from organizations. One of our requirements, for example, for ongoing funding is an annual audit from each organization, without which you cannot get renewed funding. And sometimes it imposes a burden, but it's a very necessary exercise in fiscal discipline.
Yeah, but how do you get communities to be organized?
Okay.
Because there's fantastic work that happens at grassroots level, where there's healthcare, be it hospices and daycares, etc. for children.
One of the philosophies we use is that people have to come to us, because in a way it shows initiative and it shows a proactive behavior on their part. So they organize themselves in some way. And we have this thing that even if somebody writes the requirements on a piece of paper with a piece of charcoal, at least if it gets to us, it shows that there's some intent. We can then work with that, because where there's a will, we can always build the capacity. And so that is typically how we respond to it.
So it's not a cumbersome exercise where NGOs have to be registered, for instance, and have a board of trustees, etc.
We start basically the process of a group of people could come together, they write to us, we would then help them through that process of getting registered, getting an NPO number, organizing their board, working through their policies, their structures, etc. It's very much from the grassroots to the point that they then become registered functional organizations.
All right, and they would be agents, of course, now to improve their lives. But the point is also, if there aren't any resources or infrastructure in place in a particular community, you can't provide water where there isn't a borehole or even access.
Correct. I think what happens when people get together and they organize collectively, they then begin to have some kind of leverage to speak to a municipality, to speak to a government department, for example. And there are many success stories of people that have done things like getting the clinic to operate more effectively, getting a road tarred, getting a bridge built over a river so that kids could go to school. And that's simply because they pool their resources. And as an institution, it's far better to attract resources to your community, that people know that there's actually a responsible entity with which they can work.
And what's your mission to create a vibrant, sustainable society? And looking at the 25 years of work that you've put in, how much has changed over the years?
I think in terms of social conditions, obviously the repression of the political repression of the early days is gone. I think people still deal with issues of poverty. There are still abuses of rights, especially farm workers in far removed areas where there's very little oversight. A lot of people still deal with those daily abuses. I think we do suffer from the blight of crime even in rural communities. There are issues around HIV/AIDS, I think, that affect communities that wasn't there perhaps. It wasn't as prevalent in 1984, 1985 when we started. So the social issues are still there, but I think in terms of political repression, then that's obviously gone. The issues that do come up around relationship with government is obviously around service delivery, the efficiency of service delivery, and that's where rural communities that are organized are a lot more capable of being able to address those issues.
And your model works best because it deals with the community's unique needs. It's not a homogenous group, and that has one formula.
Correct. I think one of the things that we do is that people tend to know what they need. We don't go in there with this kind of helicopter view and say, this is what you need to do. What they do is they express what they need. We then work with them to say, what is the best way to achieve that? Perhaps developing a plan around that. And so it might start with something very simple, that we want to help people get access to their ID documents, get social grants. From that, the organization says, actually, we have a lot of unemployed people. We might want to start a project here. We might want to start a food garden because we find a lot of people that don't have food. So the needs kind of emerge based on what they start from. And some organizations have gone to become hugely successful. There's one in Prince Albert, out in the Karoo in the Western Cape, that now employs 83 people in their projects, and they started out from a very small organization.
Yeah, but how do you survive as an NGO, especially in these economic times?
Yeah, where Scat has been very successful, I think, over the years, has been able to attract donor funding. It's a lot of hard work. We get 25% of our current income from government. 5% of it comes from corporate donors. 56% of it still comes from international donors. And it's a strategy that we deliberately followed a couple of years ago, that we wanted to diversify our income sources, because a few years ago we were solely dependent on international donors. So I think the key issue is diversification. We've also invested, we're a major investor in a non-profit investment company called the Detikeni Investment Company. And we have 24% of the shareholding in that. And through that we're building up our reserves. We've invested in property. So we've gone about it in a way that we try and work with what we get, and we work with it smartly.
Yeah, and somebody else might say, why is it important, or you can't change the world, things remain the way they are, and the glass is half empty. And yet you don't draw a salary from the trust, and you still give off your time. Why?
Yeah. I think it's the way I like to describe it is ordinary people trying to do extraordinary things. In this country, you need to be an active citizen. It doesn't help to sit back and say the government has to do something. It requires all of us to put shoulder to the wheel. And often, it doesn't help to sit at a dinner table and complain about crime if you're not involved in your local community crime prevention efforts, for example. There are simply not enough resources to meet all the needs. The people that work with Scat, the trustees, the staff, are incredibly passionate, incredibly committed. We get a lot of reward from our work, not financially, but just in terms of the return of seeing people actually improve and enhance their lives.
Yeah, and your outreach program, are you looking to expand that?
At the moment, it's one of those challenges. Again, because of the funding crisis, we have to be a little bit more circumspect about how bold do we go forward. We do have, we work in 60 communities in 3 provinces. We'd like to expand that. But again, it's about available funding. We are trying to go, for example, into the province of the Free State now to expand our work in those areas. So we do have a model that I think can be replicated, but it requires capacity, it requires resources.
Yeah, and you'd say that the efforts obviously have paid off in terms of making people aware of their basic human rights, issues around gender violation, HIV, AIDS, and poverty alleviation.
Yeah, I think in terms of rights awareness and knowledge about people's rights, I think it's an ongoing issue, but I think people are a lot more aware of those issues now. In terms of organizing themselves around programs and projects, there are thousands of people that are giving time, poor people helping other poor people. Yeah. And it's phenomenal to see that movement in South Africa.
Do you think that it's highly politicized, the issue around poverty, and it's not being prioritized?
I think it's obviously very visible. The key issue is about the strategies. Often it requires local solutions. It requires a lot of hard work and effort. And in a rural community where there are limited opportunities, even if there was, with the best intentions, there would probably never be more than 1,000 job opportunities. The issue is how do you expand that? How do you improve the possibilities for people to actually earn an income, to put food on the table? Yeah. And those are the efforts that are required.
Wow, we really appreciate your time, Greg, and congratulations on your 25 years of sterling work.
No, thank you so much.
Thanks so much. We're speaking to Greg Erasmus from the Social Change Assistance Trust, otherwise known as Scats. And for more information, or if you'd like to make a donation, or even offer some of your time to volunteer in the projects that they're running, you can go to their website. That's scat.org.za, or you can dial 021-418-2575. That's 021-418-2575. We'll take a quick ad break. We'll see you on the other side.